When we speak of God opening the right door, we must begin with a sober recognition of His sovereignty over every door. This is not a poetic idea meant to soothe anxious minds. It is an unshakable that defines the very structure of reality. Life places before us endless choices: schools, careers, relationships, ministries, opportunities, and with each comes the anxious question, which way is right? But what we often forget is that not every door is available for us to open. Not every path is meant for our feet, because behind the veil of appearances stands the hand of God who governs all things. The doors that swing open in your life and the ones that remain firmly shut are not accidents of circumstance. They are deliberate acts of providence. The human heart resists this truth. Deep within, we want to believe that we are the masters of our destiny, that with enough planning, persistence, or manipulation we can create our own future. But history, and more importantly, Scripture, tells a different story. Pharaoh was the mightiest man in Egypt, yet his heart was in the hands of God. Nebuchadnezzar thought himself sovereign until he found himself eating grass like an animal, humbled by the decree of heaven. Even the crucifixion of Christ, which men meant for evil, unfolded under the precise design of God's eternal plan. If such monumental events are under His control, do you think the doors of your life fall outside of His reach? Not one hinge is open or closed apart from Him. Now, this is not meant to paralyze us into inaction, as though we should sit passively waiting for the sky to split open and a voice to tell us what to do. No, God calls us to act, to seek wisdom, to pursue righteousness. But as we act, we do so with the deep awareness that our steps are ordered by Him. You and I may strategize, plan, and even dream, but only the counsel of the Lord will stand. That means we can move forward with boldness, not because we trust our own judgment, but because we know that every door ultimately opens or closes under His sovereign authority. There is both comfort and confrontation in this truth. The comfort is obvious: if God is in control, then we are not adrift in chaos. The closed doors in your life are not signs of abandonment, but proof of divine governance. You may not understand why the job fell through, why the relationship ended, why the opportunity dissolved just when you thought it was in your grasp, but you can rest in the knowledge that it was not random. It was purposeful. The God who sees the end from the beginning determined that this was not the door for you, at least not now, perhaps not ever. But there is also confrontation in this truth. It confronts our pride. It strips away the illusion that we are in control. We want sovereignty for ourselves. We want to dictate the terms, to decide which door will open and when. Yet the reality of God's rule dismantles that fantasy. And this is where many grow restless, even bitter. They say with their lips that they trust God, but in their hearts they resent His authority. When He closes a door, they see it as unfair, not realizing that it is mercy. They see it as limitation, not knowing it is protection. Think of the young man who longs for a certain career, pouring all his energy into it, only to find the way barred at every turn. Years later, he discovers that had he walked through that door, it would have destroyed his soul. Or the woman who prays desperately for a relationship that never materializes, only to later see the deep brokenness in the life of the one she longed for. What felt like rejection was in truth a rescue. God's sovereignty over doors is not the cold exercise of power. It is the warm expression of love. He closes what would harm us, and He opens what will transform us. This perspective changes the way we face life's uncertainties. Instead of panicking over which door we will walk through, we can live faithfully in the present, knowing that the one who holds the keys of David will not fail to guide us. Instead of obsessing over what might be lost, we can focus on what is sure: His character, His wisdom, His goodness. The sovereignty of God over every door should not lead us into despair, but into freedom. It frees us from the crushing burden of self-determination. It frees us from the anxiety of missing out. It frees us from the fear that our lives are somehow slipping through our fingers. Do not misunderstand me. Freedom is not found in having every door open, nor in prying them open by force. Freedom is found in surrendering to the one who opens and shuts according to His perfect wisdom. And when you grasp this truth, not merely with your intellect, but with your whole heart, you will discover that even in a hallway of closed doors, you can have peace, because you know that God is not withholding what is good. He is guiding you toward what is best. So let me leave you with this: if God holds the keys, then why would you worry about the locks? Trust Him. Rest in His sovereignty. And when the right door opens, you will not need to force it, for it will swing wide at the appointed time. And you will know with certainty that it was His hand, not yours, that made the way. There is a great danger in trying to force open the doors that God, in His wisdom, has chosen to keep closed. We often speak of this casually as though it were a minor misstep, but in truth it is one of the most destructive tendencies of the human heart. From the beginning of time, humanity has been marked by this restless ambition to grasp what is not ours. Think of Eden. God gave Adam and Eve every tree in the garden except one. He closed that door, and yet, rather than trust His goodness, they forced it open. That single act of defiance unleashed death into the world. This is no small matter. When we attempt to push past God's boundaries, we are not merely making a mistake, we are declaring war on His sovereignty. We do it because we are convinced that we know better. We imagine that what lies behind the closed door is the very thing that will complete us, satisfy us, and finally give our lives meaning. The irony is that it is almost always the opposite. The doors God shuts are often doors that would lead to ruin if opened. A career opportunity that looks prestigious may in fact enslave us to pride and greed. A relationship that seems irresistible may in truth be a path toward heart-attach and compromise. A desire we insist on fulfilling may be the very thing that pulls us away from God. But in our blindness, we mistake poison for medicine and we reach for it as if it were salvation. The scriptures give us story after story of what happens when people force their own way. Abraham was promised a son, but rather than wait for God's timing, he and Sarah took matters into their own hands with Hagar. The result was not peace, but generations of conflict. Saul, impatient for Samuel, offered the sacrifice himself, grasping for control that did not belong to him, and it cost him the kingdom. Judas, disillusioned with the pace of Christ's kingdom, forced a confrontation by betraying him, and in the end it cost him his soul. In each case, the attempt to force God's hand only brought devastation. Now think about what is happening in your own life. How often do you find yourself trying to push open doors that God has clearly closed? Maybe it's a relationship you know is unhealthy, yet you keep finding ways to justify it. Maybe it's a career pursuit that consumes you, but deep inside you sense God has not given His blessing to it. Maybe it's a secret sin you nurse, convincing yourself that you deserve it even though God has barred that path with countless warnings. This is what it means to pry at closed doors. We wrap our hands around the handle, press our weight against it, and in doing so we set ourselves against the very one we claim to trust. The danger lies not only in what happens when the door finally gives way, but also in what happens to our hearts in the process. A man who constantly strives against God's boundaries hardens himself. He becomes restless, bitter, even cynical. He begins to believe that God is withholding good from him, rather than protecting him from evil. He starts to see obedience not as freedom, but as limitation. This is the subtle poison of unbelief. It whispers, God is keeping something from you. You deserve this, take it. But what feels like liberation soon becomes slavery. And yet, here is the mercy of God. Sometimes He does not let the door open, no matter how hard we push. He spares us from ourselves. He resists our schemes, frustrates our plans, and blocks our path, not to punish, but to protect. How many of us, looking back over our lives, can thank God for the times He refused to give us what we wanted? At the moment, it felt like loss, like rejection, even like betrayal. But in hindsight, it was salvation. It was the Father guarding us from wounds we could not yet see. The problem is that in the present moment, when all we see is the locked door, our hearts are tempted toward anxiety and rebellion. We think, if I don't force this, I will miss my chance. But do you really believe that God's will for your life hangs on the strength of your grip or the cleverness of your schemes? The door that God has shut cannot be opened by all the power of men, and the door He intends to open cannot be kept shut by all the devils in hell. That is why forcing it is not only futile but dangerous. You may bruise your shoulder against it, you may exhaust your spirit in striving, but you will never overturn the decree of God. This should bring a deep sobriety to our lives. Every time you are tempted to force your way into something God has closed off, ask yourself, is this pursuit born of faith or of fear? Is it the voice of trust or of unbelief? Am I acting because I'm surrendered to His will or because I am restless in my own? These are questions that pierce the heart, and they should. For the greatest tragedy is not a missed opportunity, but a misplaced trust. So let us learn to see closed doors not as punishments, but as mercies, not as denials, but as redirections. They are the fingerprints of a Father who knows what we do not know and loves us enough to save us from ourselves. The wise heart does not curse the closed door, nor does it try to pry it open. The wise heart bows, waits, and trusts. And here is the truth you must carry with you. Forcing what God has closed is never freedom, it is always bondage. The door that yields to your impatience may very well lead to your undoing. But the door that opens in God's timing will lead you into life, peace, and transformation. So stop wrestling with the lock. Trust the one who holds the key. Worry is one of the most subtle and destructive poisons in the human soul. It doesn't always scream, it whispers. It gnaws quietly at the mind in the middle of the night. It makes the heart restless in the silence of the day. And it convinces us that we are somehow abandoned or overlooked by God. At its core, worry is not merely an emotional weakness. It is a theological problem. It is the refusal to trust that God's timing is perfect. We worry because deep down we suspect that He is either too late, too inattentive, or too unconcerned about our lives. But nothing could be further from the truth. The God who created time itself cannot be late, and the God who sustains every heartbeat cannot be inattentive. Think for a moment about the natural world. The sun rises and sets with unfailing regularity. Seasons arrive and depart in their proper rhythm. Oceans know their boundaries and stars remain in their appointed places. The universe itself testifies to a divine order, a timing that cannot be rushed and cannot be delayed. And yet, when it comes to our own lives, we somehow imagine that God has lost his grip on the clock. We think he is slow to act, that he has forgotten us, that if we do not intervene with our own anxious striving, his purposes will fail. That is the arrogance of worry. It exalts our impatience over his sovereignty. The truth is, his timing is not just precise, it is purposeful. The closed doors and delayed answers in your life are not signs of neglect. They are instruments of preparation. God often withholds what we desire, not because he does not care, but because we are not yet ready to bear the weight of what we are asking for. He delays not to punish, but to refine. He stretches time in order to stretch our faith. Just as a seed must lie hidden in the soil before it can break forth into life, so must we sometimes remain in seasons of waiting before the right door opens. If the seed demanded to sprout before the appointed season, it would wither. And so it is with us. Think about the story of Lazarus. Jesus heard of his friend's illness and deliberately delayed his coming. To the watching world, that delay looked like negligence, even cruelty. "Lord, if you had been here," Martha cried, "my brother would not have died." But Jesus was not late, he was right on time. The delay was not a failure of compassion, but a stage for a greater revelation of God's glory. The resurrection that followed would never have been possible without the waiting. What seemed like silence was preparation for a miracle. And if this is true in Lazarus' tomb, it is true in your life as well. God's delays are not denials. They are his way of aligning your heart with his purposes so that when the right door finally opens, you are able to walk through it not with pride or presumption, but with humility and gratitude. But here is the great tragedy: worry blinds us to this reality. Worry steals today by trying to live in tomorrow. It makes us frantic, suspicious, and restless. It convinces us that life is passing us by, that we are somehow falling behind. Yet the truth is that nothing God has appointed for you can ever be stolen from you. No one else can take the door he intends for you to walk through. And when you worry, you are in effect saying that you do not believe this. You are declaring with your anxiety what your lips may never dare to say aloud: God, I don't trust you. That is why worry is so destructive, not only to the mind, but to the soul. It corrodes faith from within. The alternative is not a passive resignation, but an active trust. It is learning to rest in the character of God while you wait for his timing. This kind of trust does not come easily. It requires a deliberate shift of perspective. Instead of asking, "Why hasn't God opened this door yet?" we begin to ask, "What is he teaching me in the waiting?" Instead of assuming delay is punishment, we see it as preparation. Instead of allowing impatience to fuel our striving, we allow surrender to fuel our peace. And this peace is no small gift. It is not the shallow calm that circumstances can give, but the deep confidence that comes from knowing your Father holds the future. Peace does not mean the absence of waiting. It means the absence of fear in the waiting. It means you no longer measure your worth by how quickly things happen, but by how faithful you trust the one who ordains all things. So here is the invitation: lay down the restless striving, the endless calculation, the desperate forcing of doors. Trust that the one who numbers the hairs on your head also numbers the days of your life. He knows when the right door should open, and he will not be late. Worry will not make it come faster, but faith will make you ready when it does. Let me leave you with this: if God's timing is perfect, then every moment of waiting is sacred. Do not waste it in worry. Use it to learn trust, to grow in faith, to anchor your heart in him. And when the door finally opens, you will see that his timing was not only flawless, it was the very thing that prepared you to walk into his blessing without fear. When God opens the right door, we must understand that it is never simply about the opportunity itself. Too often we imagine the blessing of an open door in terms of comfort, success, or ease. We think in categories of worldly advancement, better jobs, bigger platforms, happier circumstances. But God is not interested in merely arranging conveniences for our lives. He is interested in shaping the very core of our being. When he opens the right door, it is not just a gift to enjoy. It is a tool to transform. The opportunity is secondary. The transformation is primary. Consider how differently this frames the way we approach the doors of life. If we think that God's open doors are merely about improving our circumstances, then we will walk through them carelessly, chasing after benefits without considering the deeper work God intends to do in us. But if we recognize that every door he opens is designed to make us more like Christ, then suddenly our perspective changes. We begin to see that the greatest blessing of the right door is not what we gain externally, but what God produces internally. The door is not an escape route from difficulty, but an encounter with divine purpose. Think about Moses standing before the Red Sea. When God opened that door through the waters, the Israelites surely saw it as a way of escape, a chance to flee Pharaoh and his army. And it was. But it was more than that. It was a test of faith. It was a revelation of God's power. It was a moment where the people would learn to trust the God who saves not by human strength, but by divine might. That door through the sea was not just about survival. It was about transformation. The people who walked through it would never again see God the same way. Or take the example of Paul. God opened door after door for his ministry, leading him into cities, synagogues, prisons, and palaces. But notice this, each door carried both opportunity and opposition. Paul himself said, "A great door for effective work has opened to me, and there are many who oppose me." The open door was not merely about spreading the gospel more efficiently. It was about teaching Paul endurance, boldness, and complete reliance on the Spirit of God. Through each open door, Paul was not only bringing the message of Christ to others, he himself was being conformed to Christ in deeper ways. That is always the pattern. The right door is never just about external impact, it is about internal transformation. This should sober us because it means walking through God's open door is not always easy. In fact, it rarely is. We think the sign of the right door is that it comes without obstacles, that it feels smooth and effortless. But often, the right door is the very one that requires faith, sacrifice, and perseverance. Why? Because God is not trying to make us comfortable. He is trying to make us holy. The open door will almost always bring us into situations that demand more trust, more humility, and more surrender than we thought possible. That is how transformation happens. And this is precisely why so many people miss what God is doing. They assume that if the door comes with difficulty, it must not be from God. They pray for ease when God is offering growth. They pray for escape when God is offering transformation. And in doing so, they walk away from the very process by which God intended to shape them. The right door, you see, is not about you stepping into a better life. It is about you stepping into a deeper dependence on Him. So what does this mean for us practically? It means we must approach God's open doors with reverence, not entitlement. We must ask not only, what opportunity does this give me? But also, what work is God seeking to do in me through this? It means we should expect challenges, because those challenges are the chisels in the hand of God, carving His likeness into our character. And it means that when the door opens, we should walk through it with faith, not because we see all the benefits, but because we trust the one who holds the key. If you walk through a door and gain the whole world but lose your soul, what good is it? But if you walk through a door and come out of it more patient, more humble, more Christ-like, then you have found the true blessing of God's providence. The right door will never simply be about what you achieve. It will always be about who you become. So the next time God opens a door before you, do not only look at what lies on the other side, look at what He is about to do within you. That is the real miracle of His guidance. For in the end, the greatest door He opens is not one that leads to success or comfort, but one that leads to transformation, to holiness, to Himself. And that is the challenge I leave you with. Do not mistake opportunity for blessing, and do not confuse comfort with God's will. The right door will always draw you closer to Christ, and that is the only door worth walking through.